Module 4, Learning Outcome number 8, we will be covering the bone surface markings. In addition to bones having a variety of shapes, like those that were mentioned in Learning Outcome number 4, for example, long, short, flat, irregular, etc., bones also have different surface textures and curves or projections. This variety of bone surface markings can also be called bone features, and this is usually how we are going to address them in this course. These bone features are very important as they help us identifying each bone specifically. Not only that, but these bone features, they adapt to specific functions. We divide them here into bone features that form depressions or openings, bone features that form flat or smooth processes to be able to articulate with other bones, or lastly, bone features that form pointy or rough projections, and these will serve as ligaments or tendon attachments. Here we're going to be focusing on bone features that present as depressions or openings, and they will allow the passage of soft tissues like nerves, blood vessels, ligaments, and tendons, or they're going to be part of the formation of joints as well. These soft tissues can either pass through the openings or holes, like a fissure, a foramen, or a meatus, or they can run on top of a bone like a sulcus. Let's define them in a little bit more detail. A fissure is going to be this narrow slit or an elongated hole between adjacent parts of bones through which blood vessels or nerves are going to pass. Here we have an example of a superior orbital fissure. See how it's long? And over here is an inferior orbital fissure. Orbital because it's on the orbit, superior because it's on top, inferior because it's on the bottom. So superior orbital fissure, inferior orbital fissure. A foramen is going to be an opening through which blood vessels, nerves, or ligaments pass. An example of a foramen is going to be this one over here. This one is the infraorbital foramen. So infra, below the orbit, and it's a little hole, a rounded hole. So infraorbital foramen. If we have an infra, we also have a supra. So up here you can see the supraorbital foramen. Then we go to a fossa, which fossa is going to be a shallow depression. Here we have a shallow depression right over here on this humerus. Another one right over here. The one that's medial is going to be the coronoid fossa. The one that's lateral is going to be the radial fossa. Next, we have the sulcus, which will be defined by this long, narrow trench or passageway. It can also be called a groove, and this will accommodate blood vessels and nerves and tendons as well. An example is the intertubercular fossa, which is this opening right over here between these two other bone features. And this opening is called the intertubercular groove, which can also be called the bicipital groove or bicipital sulcus. Last, we have the meatus, which is a passageway or an opening like a tube. Here we have what we call the external. Here we have what we call the external acoustic meatus. It can also be called the external acoustic canal. And on the inside of the skull, you're going to have the internal acoustic meatus or internal acoustic canal. This table is just to give you some examples and also the definition or the description of these bone markings. Next, we're going to have these processes that will be important because they will form joints, so they will articulate with another bone. We have a condyle, a facet, and a head. Condyle is going to be, for example, this one right over here, which is called the occipital condyle. You have one on each side. And the definition of a condyle is what we call a large round protuberance or something that sticks out with a smooth articular surface at the end of a bone. So it has to be smooth because it will articulate with another bone to allow it to move at a joint. In this case, the occipital condyle is going to articulate with the occipital bone of the base of the skull. Another condyle can be these right over here at the distal end of the femur. This would be your medial condyle, and this would be your lateral condyle. And the femoral condyles will articulate with the tibia at the knee joint. Then we have a facet. A facet can be this one right over here on the vertebrae, which is called the superior articular facet. Like the name says, it's going to be on top of the vertebrae, so this is a superior view, and it will articulate with another vertebrae, and it's a facet. So superior articular facet. The way to define a facet is going to be a smooth, flat, and sometimes slightly concave or convex articular surface. Next, we have a head. This is what we call the head of the femur, and usually it's going to be rounded articular projection, and it will support on a neck, which is this part right over here of a bone. So usually if a bone has a head, it will have a neck as well that will support this head. And the head of the femur will articulate with your coxal bone at the hip joint. Again, this is a table that will give you not only the markings, but the description and an example. Last, we have the processes that will form attachment points for connective tissue, therefore for ligament and tendons. There are several of them. We have the crest, the epicondyle, the line, a spinous process, a trochanter, a tubercle, and a tuberosity. Let's start with the crest. Right over here, this is the tibia. See how there's this ridge right over here? This is called the anterior tibial crest, and it can also be called the anterior tibial margin. So it's on the anterior part of the bone, and it's this ridge. So anterior tibial for the tibia margin. Then we have the epicondyle. Epi just means that it's on top of a condyle. So if this is a smooth articulating surface, which is a condyle, these bumps will be the epicondyles. Same thing here. This is your condyle, a smooth, round articulating surface. On top of it, these bumps are going to be the epicondyles. Then we have a line. This is your line right over here. A line can be defined as this long, narrow ridge or border. In this case, this is the linea aspera of the femur, and it will serve as muscle attachment points. Then we have the spinous process, which is this sharp, slender projection right over here that will also serve for muscle attachment. In this case, it's called the spinous process, just the spinous process, and it's located on the vertebrae. Next, we have the trochanter. The trochanter are these huge bumps right over here on the femur. We have what we call a greater trochanter and a lesser trochanter. A trochanter is defined by a very large projection, and this is what it is, a large projection. A tubercle, we can see one right over here, and we can see another one right over there. This is the greater tubercle of the humerus, and this is the lesser tubercle of the humerus. They're variable in size, but they will be these rounded projections. A tuberosity, which is this portion right over here of the tibia that sticks out, it's also both variable in size, but it's a little bit more rough and bumpy when compared to the tubercle of the humerus. This tuberosity over here is going to be called the tibial tuberosity because it's a tuberosity and it's on the tibia. So now we have all the terms that you need to know. Again, this would be a table that will give you the definition and the examples, some of which we used on the previous slide.